Hello, my friends. I'm Brad David, and I am here to help you become a beacon of strength for your family, your community, and yourself. If you're injured and feel like you've lost your identity, if you're worried that all your progress is slipping away, and if you're stuck in a loop of frustration and doubt, this video is for you. This is the exact mindset that I wish someone gave me during my first major injury. I've been in the strength and conditioning field for over 15 years. I have a master's degree in exercise science, and I have helped countless people overcome all kinds of injuries: shattered bones, nerve damage, amputations, joint replacements, cancer, chronic tendinitis, stress fractures. I've really seen it all, and on top of that, I myself have dealt with injuries my entire life. I've had multiple concussions, broken bones, rotator cuff repairs, and just 4 days ago, I broke my hand training in jiu-jitsu. So, as I gear up myself for healing through this, I thought it would be helpful to walk you through the 5 most effective ways that I use my mindset to overcome injuries and come out stronger and wiser. Let's dive in. Okay, number 1, pretty much the most important, is understanding that your injury is information. It is not your identity. So most of the time when I have some sort of injury, what almost immediately happens are all these negative doom and gloom thoughts start descending upon me. And it's anything from being frustrated at myself for being weak, to feeling fragile, to second guessing whether I should have been doing the thing that caused the injury in the first place, to wondering if I'm ever going to recover from this, to spiraling about how this is going to derail my work life, my personal life, my training. All these thoughts really start to consume me quickly. And so one of the first things that I strive to remember is to understand that this injury does not reflect on who I am as a person. It does not reflect on my strength, my athleticism, and it's just something that happens to me. And for the longest time, I think I had this idea in my mind that if I could be strong enough and fit enough, then I could do the things I want to do and never get hurt. But the older I get, and the more I branch out and try new things, different sports, and go on different adventures, the more I realize that injury is really a feature of living a fulfilled life, and not a flaw. And I think if you look at especially fighters or combat sport athletes, you think about the fact that if you're a pro fighter, even when you win the competition, you are oftentimes coming out of that with cuts and bruises and maybe broken ribs and broken hands. And there's just an understanding that living an adventurous life, living a fulfilled life, challenging your body, testing yourself in a competitive environment against other people, injuries are just going to happen. And getting injured doesn't mean that you failed in any way. Your body doesn't fail you. Your body might be teaching you something though. So I just think that's important. Kind of, instead of identifying with the injury as me being a weak person or a fragile person, I'm actually using this injury to identify with myself as an athlete. This is what happens to athletic people. This is what happens to warriors. This is what happens to adventurous people. You're gonna get injured, and guess what? You're probably gonna recover from it. All the injuries I've had, I've recovered from. I've become stronger because of them, and they've really shaped me and molded me in great ways. So really the key here is to acknowledge these voices in your head, right? These things that make you feel weak or inadequate or broken or different than the person you thought you were before the injury, those thoughts are not really you. They may be trying to protect you from something, and they may be trying to, maybe it's just an old pattern that you have. Maybe it's something that someone else told you when you were younger, or in previous injuries. But most of the time, those are not really who you are. And ultimately, they're not really helpful. So I want to give you guys action that you can do to respond to these injuries when you come to them. And so I think the first thing is, when these thoughts are happening, to really take a moment to identify them and understand that these are separate from you. These thoughts are not I, right? I do this a lot with journaling. So right after this injury happened, I grabbed a journal, and because I had all these feelings and just kind of a washing machine of doom and gloom that was happening in my head. And I wanted to give labels to these things. And so this comes from like internal family systems, therapeutic work, or parts work. And this is something that's kind of intuitive, we might say, there's a part of me that feels broken from this injury. There's a part of me that feels weak. There's a part of me that feels like I'm destined to get injured every time I find something that's fun. And identifying those parts and using that as a springboard can be really helpful for identifying what's really you and what's your story and what's just the story that's being told to you. So yeah, grab a journal or even just sit down, get a quiet spot, and start with the thoughts, there is a part of me that feels whatever, and then explore that. When it comes to journaling, I'll just continue writing until I sort of feel like I have a good idea of who that thought is, what that thought is trying to tell me, and then I'll move on to the next one. By the way, if you find this information valuable, if you're going through something similar and you're looking for an extra level of accountability or guidance in overcoming and training through injuries, I work with people one-on-one online, and I would love to work with you. You can visit my website and get some more information there, and we can do this together. Okay, number 2 is focusing on what you can control and letting go of the things that you can't control. So you can spend as much time as you need to or as you want wishing that this didn't happen and wishing that it would heal as fast as possible, but you can't really control that. So the things that you can control are your attitude, your mindset, and then really optimizing the recovery and healing process and healing environment for the injury itself. So really trying to heal as effectively as possible. The body is always going to heal just at the rate that it heals, but you can really set up the best situation for it to heal as effectively and quickly as possible. So what that looks like, prioritizing the healing process, is really focusing on the quality of your sleep, getting 6 to 8 hours of sleep. And there's tons of resources out there about all the little hacks and tips and tricks you can do to maximize sleep quality and deep sleep, and things like not using screens before bed, not eating for several hours before bed, sleeping in dark rooms, sleeping in cold temperatures, like all that stuff can help sleep. Whatever you need to do to just maximize sleep and recovery during an injury. So nutrition would be another aspect to focus on. Not only are you eating nutritious, healthy whole foods, and not only are you getting enough food, but focusing on things like specific supplementation for the type of injury that you have. So in my case with a broken bone, I'm making sure that I'm drinking 2 to 3 cups of bone broth a day. That has a lot of the nutrients that bones and collagen, connective tissue, all that stuff needs to heal. I'm getting good extra doses of that. I'm making sure I'm staying on top of my calcium and my minerals so that the bones have the nutrients it needs to knit back together. And even topically, I have some herbal remedies like Solomon's seal and comfrey that I'm just rubbing on the injury itself. Anything that I can do to help maximize that healing process. Another big point here with, I would say, most injuries that I can think of is just thinking about the value of blood flow. So our blood is what actually delivers these nutrients and the immune response, and everything that an injury really needs to heal comes from the blood. And movement is an incredible medicine for stoking that blood flow and getting the healing nutrients to the site. So you have to be careful with this with your specific injury. I'm not saying you should overdo it or push it, but finding little ways to keep the limbs moving, getting as much blood flow as possible. In the case of this injury, I'm still trying to train my arms as much as I can. I can still actually swing a mace and do some light mace work. This is a 7-pound mace. I can still do that and hold it in this hand. And that kind of blood flow, that kind of activity that's not causing extra damage to this tissue is going to be really helpful. So those are things that you can control. The environment and the actions that stoke the healing process, that nourish the body and give it all the materials it needs to heal as quickly as possible. Those are things you can control. So going back to this journaling process, it's important to maybe write a list of what are the things that you can control. Your attitude, your mindset, your sleep, your hydration, your nutrition, light blood flow, light joint mobilizations, and easy stretching to just kind of keep the body feeling good. Those are things that you can control. And what are the things that you can't control? You can't really control how fast this heals. You can't take things back so that you never had the injury in the first place. And all those little thoughts, those regrets, are things that you can let go. It's out of your control. I'm not going to be able to use this hand for 6 weeks. Let it go. Move on. One prompt for your journal, or a question you can ask yourself, is simply, what can I do today that supports my recovery and growth? So if you ask yourself that question in the morning, that's going to just set the stage for your entire day and put you in that mindset and that attitude of prioritizing this process and doing what you can to control the situation. By the way, a little note on journaling. So I think you can just go through this process even as we're talking here on the video and get value from it. But a lot of times injuries take weeks to heal, or months or years sometimes to heal. And so it can be really helpful as you go through this process to literally have a journal, write this stuff down, spend some time, maybe even several days, going through this process. You don't have to do it all at once, but it's super helpful to have it written down, because life is going to go on. You're going to come into frustrations and maybe even further setbacks with this sort of thing. And so it's important to just have that stuff written down. You might be revisiting it in the future. Right. Number 3 is focusing on adaptation over avoidance. So there's now an obstacle to all the things that I want to do. Exercise is a good example. Exercising for me now, I have to bring a little creativity to it. I have to adapt the way that I'm training, and it would be really easy for me to just avoid training altogether, to think, my hands hurt, I can't do anything about this. I'm just going to take the next 6 weeks off. But when I stop and think about it, really the majority of my body is completely fine and capable of doing what it needs to do. So this strategy here is sort of taking inventory, like focusing on what you can control or what you can't control, but it's getting a little more into the details of your day-to-day activities, behaviors, goals, and specifically in this case, really training, right? How do you continue meeting your goal? How do you continue exercising through an injury? I'm going to do an entire video on the actual training and bodily side of, like, how do you think outside the box? What kind of equipment do I use to adapt and all that sorts of stuff. But it's helpful in the beginning to think of this big picture of what were you doing before the injury, let's say workout wise, and now what can you still do, and then what do you have to adapt? My legs are fine. All lower body training's good. I can run a little bit more. I can still do flexibility training. Maybe I focus a little more on calisthenics or jumps or plyometrics for the next 6 weeks, because that's what I can focus on. I still have one good arm, and maybe there's equipment that I can use that allows me to attach something to the wrist and do some more training that way. Whether we're talking about training or your work life or your family life, I also have a toddler in my house, and I'm still having to pick him up and change him and drive him to daycare and things like that. Whatever the main pieces of your life, personal life, professional life, exercise, health and fitness life, all that stuff, it's helpful to spend some time looking at what can I do and what do I need to adapt. This is a great place to include things like SMART goals. I have a whole video on that. One of the first videos I did on this channel was a deep dive into SMART goals, all added below. One of the prompts here for a journal could be on a weekly basis, just asking yourself, what did I adapt successfully this week? Where did I avoid or check out? And how can I re-engage or adjust my approach for the following week? That can be helpful on a weekly basis, just to stay on top of how your recovery process is going and how your creative process is going, for making sure you're adapting to things and not just slipping into this pattern of avoiding the things you need to do. Number 4 is recognizing that the mind leads the body. The body is what needs to heal here, but your mindset is going to dictate how consistent you are, how stressed you are, and how focused you are in actually prioritizing this healing process and returning back to the state that you want to be. So, one of the best things that you can do is try to control your attitude, how you're approaching this entire situation. And there's bits and pieces of that we've talked about already. Not identifying with your injury, just understanding that it's just something that happens. Your identity is as an athlete, as a warrior, as an adventurer. Injuries are going to happen, and you've got the spirit to respond and to overcome that. That's a powerful attitude shift and a mindset shift. A new one here, and this one's classic, you hear it everywhere, but just gratitude. Really thinking of the big picture of the situation that you're in and being grateful. This could be grateful for aspects of the injury itself. Like, for example, with this, I am so thankful that I can take this thing off to shower, and it's summer here. I'm so thankful that I can take this thing off and still swim. I can take this off at the end of the day and work on some blood flow practices and just range of motion with my wrist. That's so much better than if I was just locked in a stinky cast for 6 weeks, which I've been there before many times, and I don't recommend it. Another thing I'm thankful for with this is that it was actually a bone break and not a tendon or ligament injury. A lot of times the hands, they're so delicate, they're so intricate too, that injuries to the tendons and ligaments, they might require surgery even if it's not a bad injury, like it might not be very painful or very traumatic, but there's just enough damage done to an intricate part of the body that it requires surgery. This doesn't require any surgery. I am so thankful for that. Another helpful technique is focusing on reframing your situation. And one way to think about that is I get to do X versus I have to do X. So I get to focus on strengthening something that I never paid attention to before. That's a different outlook than I have to do physical therapy for 6 weeks, or I have to stop practicing my sport. It's really, I get to focus on strengthening these chinks in my armor. I get to identify something that's a little weak, and I get to focus on shoring that up for the future. Another helpful technique here is the idea of visualization, or really what I would call imagination, because it doesn't have to be visible, or it doesn't have to be something that you're literally seeing. It's about creating a sensory and emotional state that reflects the situation that you want to be in, right? So one way to think of this from a prompt standpoint, or a question to ask yourself would be, if my recovery was a movie montage, what would that look like? So that's a chance for you to think, what kind of environment are you in? What kind of activities are you doing? What kind of social support or what kind of friends are involved in your recovery process? What kinds of foods are you eating? And can you taste those nutritious foods that are feeding your body? Can you smell the gym environment that you're training in? Or can you smell the outdoors as you're going for a run that's promoting health in your body? You want to imagine, not necessarily visualize, but imagine the ultimate outcome that you want, and that can be a helpful technique. Another question, what would I say to a teammate who was going through a similar situation? This one's important because I think it's so important to be your own best friend. And the things that we would often encourage a friend of ours or a teammate of ours is totally different than the things that we tell ourselves. We're often very critical of ourselves and we hold ourselves to sort of an impossible standard. But if someone we loved was going through this similar issue, we would be very caring, very encouraging, and ultimately, you want to treat yourself that way. Be your own best friend. That is a major mindset shift that leads to a healthier body and a healthier life. Okay, point number 5. Are we dealing with a breakdown or are we dealing with a breakthrough? And ultimately, this is one way of talking about a scarcity mindset versus a growth mindset. And it is so valuable to see the situation you're in as an opportunity and perhaps as a doorway rather than a wall. And a chance for you to learn something from your body, to learn something about yourself, to overcome and to grow into a stronger and wiser and more experienced version of yourself. Thinking of the injury that you're dealing with not as a setback or as a dead end, but as a gateway, okay? One way to think about this is thinking about the deeper meaning behind what this injury is. What is this trying to teach you? What is it trying to tell you? What does this injury mean for you? And the cool thing is, you get to pick what that means, right? We talked about in the very beginning, these thoughts might start to occur where the meaning is placed on us for this injury. This injury means that I'm not cut out for the sport that I was doing. This injury means that I'm not strong enough, that I'm too fragile, that I'm not good enough, or I didn't do enough to prevent this from happening. That's all meaning, but it's not very helpful. You're seeing this as a breakdown. Instead, how can you reframe this and view this situation as a breakthrough, okay? How can you discern meaning and get valuable, positive meaning from this situation? Some questions to ask yourself could be, what has this injury taught me that I wouldn't have learned otherwise? Or, who am I becoming through this? Or, what is the opportunity hidden inside this injury? All of these questions, think of that value and the meaning behind this. And again, that is so important. And I truly believe this. This is, like I said, I've had so many freaking injuries my entire life. And there's even a pattern with me, and I see this with other people a lot. A lot of times injuries happen when you're having the most fun. You're either getting into something new and you're really enjoying it, or you're kind of on the top of your game, so you're going really hard in a competitive environment. We usually hit these peaks right before something happens that kind of slams us down into this trough. And seeing that as the journey itself, you're going to have these peaks and valleys, and seeing them as breakthroughs. And every single time I've suffered an injury, it has actually taught me so much about what it means to be a resilient person, a positive person, what it means about my identity, and all of these things that really have made me a stronger, happier, healthier, more capable person. And looking back, I'm sure you can find things that have done the same for you. And the more you focus on that process, the better off you'll be. So there you have it. Those are my 5 most effective strategies that I literally have used time and time again and learned through trial and error to really help me overcome injuries, to stay positive, to grow and use that injury as a springboard to really become the person that I want to be and perform at the level I want to perform. Let's do a quick recap here. Number 1, injury is just information. It is not your identity. Number 2, focus on the things that you can control and let go of what you can't control. Number 3, adaptation over avoidance. How can you adapt the way you were training, the way you were living, instead of just throwing everything to the wayside? Number 4, the mind leads the body. Starting with the mindset, things like gratitude, reframing, using imaginative or visualization processes to give you the environment internally that you need to feel positive and to grow from this. And then lastly, viewing this as a breakdown or as a breakthrough. We want to focus on seeing this as an opportunity to grow, as an opportunity to learn more about ourselves, and as a gateway into a stronger, wiser, and more experienced version of ourselves. So there you have it. I hope you enjoyed this video. You got some value out of this. If you made it this far, thank you so much. Please like, comment, subscribe. Let me know about a time that you had an injury and what helped you overcome it. I'd love to hear from it. And again, if you want to work together, I do online training with people. You can visit my website, adventureathletefit.com. There'll be links in the description, and I hope to see you soon. Thank you.